Captain Jake Morrison stood at the large window in his ship's main room. He looked out at the dark space filled with bright stars. His ship, the Ranger, had been traveling for 3 months to reach this place. Today was special. Today, humans would meet aliens for the first time. Jake was 42 years old and had been flying ships for 20 years. He had seen many things in space, but never anything like this. His hands were steady, but his heart beat fast. The whole human race was counting on him and his crew. "Captain, they are coming," said Lisa Grant. She was the person who would do most of the talking with the aliens. Lisa was smart and could speak many languages. She had studied alien signals for 2 years before this meeting. Jake turned away from the window. "How many ships do you see, Ryan?" Ryan Bell was in charge of keeping the ship safe. He looked at his screens and said, "3 ships, sir. They are bigger than ours, but they are not pointing weapons at us." The alien ships looked like nothing Jake had ever seen. They were long and curved like silver fish swimming through space. They moved without making any sound that his machines could hear. Each ship was twice as big as the Ranger. "Dr. Parker, what do you think?" Jake asked. Dr. Amy Parker was the ship's expert on alien life. She had been watching the alien signals and trying to understand their language. "Their messages seem friendly, Captain. They call themselves the Kalari. They want to trade with us and learn about human culture." Jake nodded. This was what Earth had hoped for. Humans needed new technology and new friends among the stars. Earth was getting crowded, and people needed new places to live. Maybe these aliens could help. "Sir, they are asking to come aboard," said the communications officer, Tony Kim. "Tell them yes," Jake said. "But only 5 aliens can come on our ship. We will meet them in the cargo bay." The cargo bay was the biggest room on the ship. Jake's crew had cleaned it and put chairs in a circle. They had also put some human food and water on tables. Lisa had said this would show the aliens that humans were friendly. Jake walked to the cargo bay with Lisa, Ryan, and Dr. Parker. 10 other crew members were already there, standing along the walls. Everyone wore their best uniforms. Everyone looked nervous, but excited. The alien ship connected to the Ranger with a tube of metal. Jake could hear strange sounds through the walls. Then the door opened. The first alien to walk through was tall and thin. It had silver skin that seemed to shine with its own light. Its head was larger than a human head, and it had big eyes that were completely black. It wore clothes that looked like they were made of liquid metal. 4 more aliens came behind the first one. They all looked similar, but the first one wore different clothes. This one had bright marks on its clothing that seemed to move and change color. "I am Ambassador Vextha," the first alien said in perfect English. Its voice was soft and musical. "I speak for the Kalari people. We are happy to meet humans." Jake stepped forward. "I am Captain Jake Morrison. Welcome to our ship. We are happy to meet you, too." The ambassador smiled. At least, Jake thought it was a smile. The alien's mouth curved upward like a human smile, but its black eyes showed no emotion. "We have traveled far to find your people," Vextha said. "Our scientists detected your radio signals many years ago. We have been learning your languages and studying your culture." Lisa stepped forward. "Ambassador, we have also been studying your signals. We hope we can become friends and help each other." The aliens looked around the cargo bay. They seemed interested in everything. One of them walked over to the food table and looked at the bread and fruit that the crew had put there. "Your ship is smaller than ours," said another alien. "But it is well made. How do you travel between stars?" Dr. Parker explained about human engines and fuel. The aliens listened carefully and asked many questions. They seemed impressed that humans had learned to travel in space without help from other alien races. For 2 hours, both groups talked and shared information. The aliens told humans about their home world, which had 3 suns and was covered, mostly by water. Humans told the aliens about Earth, with its one sun and many different kinds of land and ocean. Jake began to feel hopeful. The aliens seemed honest and friendly. They wanted to trade their advanced technology for human art, music, and food. They were especially interested in human books and movies. "We have much to offer each other," Ambassador Vextha said. "Your people are creative in ways we have never seen. Our people are skilled at building machines and using energy." But then something changed. One of the aliens was looking at a screen that showed information about the Ranger. The alien's eyes grew wide, and it made a sound like a whistle. "Ambassador," the alien said in its own language. But Jake's computer was translating the words. "Look at their weapon systems." Vextha moved quickly to look at the screen. The ambassador's friendly expression disappeared. The alien's silver skin seemed to grow darker. "Captain Morrison," Vextha said, and now its voice was cold. "You told us you came in peace, but your ship has many weapons. These are not weapons for defense. These are weapons for attacking other ships." Jake felt his stomach drop. He looked at Lisa, who looked confused and worried. Ryan put his hand near his weapon, but Jake shook his head. "Ambassador, all of our ships have weapons," Jake said carefully. "Space can be dangerous. We need to protect ourselves from asteroids and other dangers." "Asteroids?" said Vextha. The alien's black eyes seemed to grow even darker. "These weapons could destroy our ships. You came here saying you wanted peace, but you brought weapons of war." Dr. Parker stepped forward. "Please, Ambassador. In human culture, it is normal to carry weapons for protection. We do not intend to use them against you." But the aliens were not listening anymore. They were talking to each other in their own language, and the translation computer was having trouble keeping up. Jake could hear words like deception and threat and danger. Ambassador Vextha reached to its belt and pulled out something that made Jake's blood run cold. It was a weapon, but unlike any weapon Jake had ever seen. It looked like a curved sword, but it glowed with blue energy. The air around it seemed to bend and twist. "By the laws of my people," Vextha said, pointing, the energy blade at Jake's chest, "you have shown deception. You came here pretending to want peace, but you brought weapons to threaten us. This cannot be forgiven." The other aliens also drew weapons. The cargo bay, which had been warm and friendly just minutes before, now felt cold and dangerous. Jake's crew members along the walls tensed up, ready to fight if needed. "Ambassador, please," Lisa said. "There has been a misunderstanding. We can explain." But Vextha was not interested in explanations. The alien held the glowing blade steady, pointing it directly at Jake's heart. "Captain Morrison," the ambassador said, "you will answer for your deception. Choose your weapon. We will settle this according to the ancient ways of combat." Jake stared at the glowing blade pointed at his chest. The energy weapon hummed with a sound like angry bees. He could feel heat coming from it, even though it was 3 feet away from him. The alien ambassador's black eyes showed no mercy. "I do not understand," Jake said slowly. "What ancient ways?" Ambassador Vextha stood very still. The other aliens formed a circle around Jake and their leader. They began to make a low humming sound that filled the cargo bay. "Among the Kelari, people, when someone shows deception in matters of peace, there must be single combat," Vextha explained. "One warrior against another. If you win, your people will be forgiven, and we can try to trust you again. If you lose, then your deception will be paid for with your life." Lisa stepped forward quickly. "Ambassador, this is not necessary. We can solve this problem by talking." "No," said Vextha. "The challenge has been made. Captain Morrison brought weapons to a peace meeting and tried to hide this fact from us. In our culture, this is a crime that can only be settled by combat." Jake looked around the cargo bay. His crew members stood against the walls, their hands near their weapons but not drawing them. Ryan looked ready to start shooting, but Jake knew that would make things much worse. If fighting started, people would die, and any chance of peace would be lost forever. Dr. Parker was typing quickly on her computer tablet. She was looking up everything she could find about Kalari culture. After a few seconds, she walked over to Lisa and whispered something in her ear. Lisa's face went pale. She walked over to Jake and spoke very quietly so only he could hear. "Captain, Dr. Parker says their combat rituals are sacred to them. If you refuse to fight, they will think all humans are cowards. They will probably attack Earth to remove what they see as a threat." Jake felt cold inside his chest. "And if I fight? If you win, they will respect us and we might still have peace. If you lose?" Lisa could not finish the sentence. Jake understood. If he lost, he would die and the aliens might still attack Earth. But if he refused to fight, they would definitely attack Earth. There was really only one choice he could make. "I accept your challenge," Jake said in a loud, clear voice. The alien stopped humming. Ambassador Vextha seemed pleased. "Good. You show courage. Now choose your weapon, human." Jake walked over to the wall where the emergency weapon locker was kept. He put his hand on the scanner and the metal door slid open. Inside were several types of weapons: laser guns, pulse rifles, and some older weapons that used bullets. But Jake's eyes went to something else. At the bottom of the locker was a simple knife. It was not fancy or high-tech. The blade was made of titanium metal and was about 8 inches long. The handle was wrapped in black leather that had been worn smooth by many hands. This knife had belonged to Jake's grandfather, Colonel Steve Morrison. Steve had carried it during the Earth Wars, when different human nations fought each other before they learned to work together. Steve had given the knife to Jake when Jake became a ship captain. "A blade for a blade," Jake said, picking up the knife. "This seems fair." Ambassador Vextha looked at the simple human weapon and seemed confused. "That is a very basic tool. Are you sure you do not want something with more power?" "This will do," Jake said. The knife felt comfortable in his hand. It was perfectly balanced and felt like an old friend. The aliens began to hum again, but louder this time. They moved to form a perfect circle around Jake and their ambassador. Dr. Parker was still reading about their culture on her tablet. "Captain," she called out, "their combat rituals have very specific rules. The fight continues until one warrior yields or dies. No one else can help. The fight must be fair, with no tricks or surprises." Vextha activated the energy blade fully. It grew brighter and longer, becoming almost 3 feet of glowing blue death. When the alien moved it through the air, it left trails of light behind it. "I have been trained in combat since I was young," Vextha said. "I have fought in 57 challenges and have never been defeated, but I will give you honor in this fight, human. You will die as a warrior." Jake held his grandfather's knife and tried to remember everything Steve had taught him about fighting. But that had been years ago, when Jake was just a teenager. Steve had shown him how to hold a knife, how to move, and how to read an opponent's intentions. "Remember, Jake," his grandfather had said during one lesson, "a weapon is just a tool. The warrior's mind is what wins or loses a fight. Watch your enemy carefully. Learn how they move. Find their weaknesses." The two fighters began to circle each other slowly. Jake watched how Vextha moved. The alien was graceful and smooth like a dancer. The energy blade moved in complex patterns that were beautiful to watch. But Jake noticed something. Every movement Vextha made was very formal and precise. It was like the alien was performing a dance that had been practiced many times. The moves were perfect, but they were also predictable. Jake's grandfather had also told him about different fighting styles. "Some fighters care more about looking good than winning," Steve had said. "They make their moves pretty, but not practical. If you ever fight someone like that, use their pride against them." Vextha suddenly attacked. The energy blade came down in a wide arc that would have cut Jake in half if it had connected. But Jake was ready. He jumped to the side and the blade missed him by inches. Where the energy weapon hit the metal floor, it left a deep, glowing cut. "You are quick," Vextha said with something like approval. "Good. A quick death is no honor for either warrior. Jake did not answer. He was too busy trying to stay alive. Vextha attacked again, this time with a series of quick cuts that forced Jake to back up toward the wall. The alien's blade moved so fast it was almost invisible. Jake used his knife to block one of the attacks. The titanium blade rang like a bell when it hit the energy weapon, but it did not break. Jake's grandfather had told him that titanium was one of the strongest metals humans knew how to make. But blocking was not enough. Each time Jake's knife touched the energy blade, he could feel the shock go up his arm. The alien weapon was much more powerful than his simple knife. Vextha pressed forward with another attack. This time the alien spun around completely, bringing the energy blade in a circle that should have been impossible to dodge. Jake dropped flat on the floor and rolled away. The energy blade passed over, his head so close that he could smell his hair burning. He came up in a crouch several feet away from the alien. "Interesting," Vextha said. "You fight like an animal, not like a warrior. You have no style, no grace." Jake wiped sweat from his forehead. His uniform was already torn in several places where the energy blade had come close to hitting him. He was breathing hard, but Vextha looked as calm as when the fight had started. "Maybe," Jake said. "But I am still alive." The alien seemed to think this was funny. "Yes, you are still alive. But for how much longer?" Jake's crew watched in silence. He could see the worry on their faces. Lisa looked like she wanted to cry. Ryan looked angry and frustrated that he could not help. Dr. Parker was still reading her tablet, probably looking for some piece of information that might help. Jake thought about his grandfather again. Steve had fought in real wars, not in ceremonial duels. He had fought to survive, not to look good. And he had taught Jake that sometimes the best way to win was to make your enemy overconfident. "You are right," Jake said to Vextha. "I am not a real warrior like you. I am just a ship captain who knows a little about fighting." Vextha seemed pleased by this admission. "It is good that you understand this. Perhaps your death will teach your people to be more honest about their limitations." The alien began another attack, but this time with even more complex moves than before. Vextha was showing off now, making the energy blade dance through the air in patterns that were almost like art. Jake pretended to be more tired than he really was. He moved slower and made his dodges look more desperate. He wanted Vextha to think the fight was almost over. And his plan worked. The alien became more aggressive, using bigger and more dramatic attacks. Each move was designed to end the fight with one perfect strike. But each move also left Vextha open for just a moment. Jake began to see the pattern in the alien's attacks. His grandfather had been right. Pride could be a weakness. Jake continued to circle around Ambassador Vextha, watching the alien's every move. The energy blade left bright trails in the air as it moved, creating patterns of blue light that hurt to look at directly. Jake's simple titanium knife seemed very small and weak compared to the alien weapon. But Jake was starting to understand something important. His grandfather had taught him about many different fighting styles from Earth's history. Some fighters from ancient Japan moved like dancers, making every attack beautiful and perfect. Some fighters from old Europe used big, heavy weapons and tried to overpower their enemies. Some fighters from other places were quick and sneaky, using speed instead of strength. Vextha fought like the ancient Japanese warriors Jake had read about. Every move was perfect and graceful. The alien never made a mistake or wasted any motion. But this also meant that every attack followed rules and patterns. Jake's grandfather had fought in real wars where there were no rules. Steve had learned to fight dirty when he needed to. He had taught Jake that survival was more important than looking good. "You learn quickly, human," Vextha said as Jake dodged another attack. "But learning is not enough. You need skill that takes years to develop." Jake did not answer. He was too busy watching and learning. Each time Vextha attacked, Jake paid attention to how the alien moved his feet, how he held his shoulders, and how he prepared for each strike. The alien was right about one thing. Vextha had much more skill and experience, but Jake was starting to notice small things that gave away what Vextha was going to do next. When the alien was going to attack from the right, he shifted his weight to his left foot first. When he was going to spin around, he took a slightly deeper breath. When he was going to make a big overhead strike, his grip on the energy weapon tightened just a little bit. Jake's grandfather had called these things tells. They were like signals that every fighter gave away without knowing it. If you can read your enemy's tells, Steve had said, you can know what they will do before they do it. Vextha made another spinning attack, but this time Jake was ready for it. Instead of jumping back, Jake stepped forward and to the side. The energy blade missed him completely, and for just a moment, Vextha's back was turned to him. Jake could have struck then, but he was not ready yet. He still needed to learn more about his opponent. So he stepped back and waited for the next attack. "Clever," Vextha said. "You are beginning to understand the flow of combat. Perhaps you will provide better sport than I thought." The other aliens around the circle continued their low humming. Jake noticed that the sound got faster when the fighting was exciting and slower when there was a pause. It was like music that matched the rhythm of the battle. Dr. Parker was still reading her tablet, but now she was also watching the fight carefully. Jake wondered what she was learning about Kalari culture that might help him. Vextha began a new series of attacks, but these were different from before. Instead of single, powerful strikes, the alien made many quick cuts that forced Jake to move constantly. The energy blade seemed to be everywhere at once. Jake's breathing became harder. His legs were getting tired from all the jumping and dodging. His uniform was soaked with sweat, and he could feel his heart beating very fast. But he was also learning more about how Vextha fought. The alien was very good at attacking, but Jake noticed that Vextha never really defended himself. The alien expected his enemies to run away or block his attacks, not to fight back. This made sense if Vextha had always fought other Kalari warriors who used the same formal fighting style. But Jake was human, and humans had learned to fight in many different ways. Jake decided to test something. When Vextha made his next attack, Jake did not dodge or block. Instead, he attacked back at the same time. Vextha was so surprised that he almost dropped his energy blade. The alien had to jump backward to avoid Jake's knife, and for the first time in the fight, Vextha looked uncertain. "That is not proper." "Technique," Vextha said. "You should defend yourself when I attack, not attack me back." "Why?" Jake asked. "Is there a rule about that?" Vextha seemed confused by the question. "It is simply how combat works. One warrior attacks, the other defends, then they switch. This is the way it has always been done." Jake smiled. His grandfather had been right about formal fighters. They knew only one way to fight, and when someone did something different, they did not know how to respond. "Maybe that is how your people fight," Jake said. "But humans do things differently." Jake began to attack more aggressively. He used his knife to strike at Vextha while the alien was still making his own attacks. This forced Vextha to defend himself instead of just attacking all the time. The energy blade was still much more powerful than Jake's knife, but now Vextha had to use it for blocking as well as attacking. This made the alien's movements less graceful and more desperate. Jake could see that Vextha was getting frustrated. The alien's perfect fighting style was not working anymore. Every time Vextha tried to make one of his beautiful, complex attacks, Jake would do something unexpected that ruined the pattern. "Stand still and fight properly," Vextha said, his musical voice becoming harsh with anger. "No," Jake said simply. Jake had learned something else from watching the alien fight. The energy blade was very powerful, but it was also heavy. Each time Vextha swung it, the alien had to use a lot of strength. After many attacks, even a strong fighter would get tired. Jake's titanium knife was much lighter. He could swing it many times without getting as tired as Vextha was getting with his energy weapon. So Jake began to make many small attacks instead of trying for one big one. He darted in with quick strikes that forced Vextha to block, then jumped away before the alien could counterattack. Each time, Jake's knife struck the energy blade with a ringing sound like a bell. Each time, Vextha had to use strength to block the attack, and each time, the alien got a little more tired. Jake's crew was beginning to look hopeful. They could see that their captain was not just surviving anymore, he was actually fighting, back and making progress. Lisa was watching with wide eyes. She had never seen Jake fight before. He had always been the calm, thoughtful captain who solved problems with words instead of weapons. But now she was seeing a different side of him. Dr. Parker suddenly looked up from her tablet with excitement. She had found something important. She tried to call out to Jake, but one of the alien warriors stopped her. "No help allowed," the alien said in English. "This is single combat." But Jake had seen Dr. Parker's expression. She had learned something that might help him. He just had to figure out what it was. Jake thought about everything he knew about alien culture and technology. Most alien machines were very advanced, but also very complex. They were designed to work perfectly under normal conditions, but they might have problems when used in ways they were not designed for. Jake's grandfather had told him about human weapons from the old days. "Simple tools are sometimes better than complex ones," Steve had said. "A simple tool might not be as powerful, but it will work when complex tools fail." Jake looked at Vextha's energy blade. It was beautiful and deadly, but it was also very complex. What would happen if someone used it in a way it was not designed for? Vextha made another attack, bringing the energy blade down in a powerful overhead strike. This time, instead of dodging, Jake stepped forward and caught the alien's wrist with his free hand. Both fighters were now very close together, too close for either of them to use their weapons effectively. But Jake had expected this. Vextha had not. For just a moment, both warriors struggled against each other, each trying to get free so they could use their weapons again. And in that moment, Jake saw his chance. He pushed Vextha backward, causing the alien to stumble. As Vextha tried to regain his balance, he swung the energy blade wildly through the air. The energy weapon struck the metal wall of the cargo bay. There was a bright flash of light and a loud crackling sound. Sparks flew everywhere, and the lights in the cargo bay flickered. When the light faded, Jake saw that Vextha's energy blade was making strange noises. The blue glow was flickering on and off, and the humming sound had become a harsh buzzing. "What did you do?" Vextha demanded, looking at his weapon with alarm. Jake smiled. "I made you use your weapon wrong." Vextha stared at his malfunctioning energy blade with growing alarm. The weapon that had been a perfect tool of elegant destruction just moments before was now sparking and making angry buzzing sounds. The blue glow flickered like a dying light. "Bulb." "This should not be possible," Vextha said, shaking the weapon gently. "Our technology does not fail." Jake wiped sweat from his forehead and kept his titanium knife ready. He could see that the alien was confused and worried. This was exactly what Jake had hoped would happen. "Maybe your technology is very good," Jake said, breathing hard. "But every tool has limits. Even the best tools can break if you use them wrong." The other Kailari warriors around the circle were making worried sounds. They were talking to each other in their own language, and Jake's computer was translating their words. They were saying things like "impossible" and "the weapon cannot fail" and "what kind of power do these humans have?" Dr. Parker was trying very hard not to smile. Jake could see that she understood what had happened. The energy blade was designed to cut through certain materials in certain ways. When it hit the reinforced metal wall of the cargo bay at the wrong angle and with too much force, it had overloaded. Vextha tried to fix his weapon by pressing buttons on the handle. The energy blade flickered back to full power for a few seconds, then went back to buzzing and sparking. "Your weapon will work again," Jake said. "But not for long, and each time it fails it will take longer to fix." This was just a guess, but Jake thought he was right. Most complex machines had safety systems to prevent damage. When those safety systems activated, the machine needed time to reset itself. Vextha's black eyes looked angry. "You tricked me. You made me damage my own weapon." I made you swing your weapon at a wall, Jake said. You chose to do that. I just gave you a reason. Jake's grandfather had taught him about this too. Sometimes the best way to beat a superior weapon is to make your enemy use it stupidly, Steve had said. A smart warrior can turn his enemy's strength into weakness. Vextha raised his flickering energy blade and prepared to attack again. But Jake could see that the alien was no longer confident. Vextha was angry and confused, and angry fighters made more mistakes. The attack came faster than before, but it was also less controlled. Vextha was trying to end the fight quickly before his weapon failed completely. The energy blade swept toward Jake's head in a wide arc. Jake ducked under the attack and moved closer to Vextha. He was inside the reach of the long energy weapon, now where his shorter knife would be more useful. Jake struck quickly with his titanium blade, aiming for Vextha's weapon hand. He did not try to cut the alien, just to hit the energy weapon again. The titanium knife struck the handle of the energy blade with a loud clang. More sparks flew, and the alien weapon made a sound like a screaming animal before going completely dark. Vextha stared at his dead weapon in shock. For the first time since the fight began, the alien looked truly afraid. How? Vextha whispered. Your primitive tool should not be able to damage our technology. Jake stepped back but kept his knife ready. My grandfather taught me something. He said that sometimes old simple things work better than new complex things. A simple tool that works is better than a fancy tool that breaks. The alien warriors around the circle had stopped humming. They were all staring at their ambassador's broken weapon. Some of them looked scared. Others looked angry. Jake could understand why they were upset. The Kalari probably thought their technology was perfect and could never fail. Seeing a human with a simple knife disable their advanced weapon was like seeing magic. But Jake knew it was not magic. It was just understanding how things worked and using that knowledge wisely. Vextha threw down his broken energy blade and stepped back. This combat is over. I cannot fight without a weapon. Wait, Jake said. The fight does not have to be over. Everyone in the cargo bay stared at Jake. His crew looked confused. The aliens looked surprised. Even Vexatha seemed shocked. What do you mean? The alien ambassador asked. Jake walked over to the broken energy weapon and picked it up. The handle was still warm from the overloaded energy systems. He offered it back to Vextha. Dr. Parker, how long does your research say it takes for their weapons to reset after an overload? Dr. Parker looked at her tablet. Based on the energy readings I am seeing, probably about 10 minutes. Jake nodded and held out the weapon to Vextha. Then we wait 10 minutes, and then we finish this fight properly. Vextha looked very confused. Why would you do this? You have the advantage now. You could declare victory. Because that would not prove anything, Jake said. You challenged me to combat with weapons. If I win only because your weapon broke, then I did not really win the combat. I just won because of an accident. The alien stared at Jake for a long moment. You would give up your advantage to continue? A fight that might kill you? Yes, Jake said simply. That is what honor means to humans. Lisa looked like she wanted to argue with Jake's decision. Ryan looked like he thought Jake was crazy, but Dr. Parker was nodding with approval. Captain, Dr. Parker said, I think this is very important to their culture. The way you are acting now might matter more than who wins the fight. Vextha slowly took back his energy weapon. I do not understand humans, the alien said. You fight without following proper rules, but then you give up advantages to be fair. You carry weapons but claim to want peace. You are very confusing. Maybe, Jake said. But confusion can be good. It means we have things to learn from each other. The two fighters sat down on opposite sides of the circle to wait for the energy weapon to reset. The alien warriors began humming again, but softer this time. It sounded almost like a song of respect. Jake used the time to rest and think. His legs were tired and his uniform was torn, but he felt good. He had learned important things about how Vextha fought and he had shown the aliens that human technology and thinking could be useful even when it seemed primitive. But the fight was not over yet. When Vextha's weapon worked again, Jake would still have to find a way to win. And now the alien would be more careful about how he used his energy blade. Jake thought about his grandfather again. Steve had always said that the most important thing in any fight was to stay calm and keep thinking. Panic makes warriors stupid, Steve had said. Smart warriors win more than strong warriors. After 10 minutes, Vextha stood up and activated his energy weapon. The blue glow was steady and bright again. The alien tested the blade carefully, making sure it was working properly. "Are you ready to continue, Captain Morrison?" Vextha asked. Jake stood up and held his titanium knife ready. "I am ready." But something had changed. Vextha was looking at Jake differently now. The alien's black eyes showed something that had not been there before. It might have been respect. "Before we continue," Vextha said, "I want to say something. You fight strangely, but you fight with honor. Whatever happens in this combat, I will remember that." Jake nodded. "Thank you, Ambassador. You are a skilled warrior. Fighting you has taught me much." The two fighters began to circle each other again, but this time felt different from before. This was no longer just about winning or losing. This had become about understanding and respect between two very different kinds of people. Vextha attacked first, but his movements were more careful now. He did not make the big, dramatic strikes that had looked so impressive before. Instead, he used precise, controlled attacks that were harder to counter. Jake responded with the lessons he had learned in the first part of the fight. He did not try to match Vextha's grace and skill. Instead, he used his own advantages, speed, unpredictability, and the knowledge of how to make complex things work against themselves. The energy blade and the titanium knife met again and again, filling the cargo bay with ringing sounds and flashes of light. Both fighters were more tired now, but both were also more focused. Jake could see that Vextha was learning too. The alien was beginning to adapt to Jake's unusual fighting style. Vextha was starting to expect Jake's unexpected moves. This was what Jake had been waiting for. When an enemy started to predict your moves, that was when you changed your entire approach. Jake stopped attacking and started moving backward. Vextha followed, thinking that the human was getting tired and retreating. But Jake was not retreating. He was leading Vextha toward a specific place in the cargo bay. Near the wall where the energy weapon had overloaded before, there was a support beam that stuck out from the ceiling. When Vextha made his next attack, Jake did something that surprised everyone in the room, including himself. Jake jumped backward and grabbed the support beam above his head. Using his momentum, he swung his legs up and kicked Vextha in the chest with both feet. The alien ambassador stumbled backward, surprised by this completely unexpected move. Vextha had never seen anyone use the ceiling as part of a fight before. Jake dropped back to the floor and immediately pressed his attack. While Vextha was still off balance, Jake moved in close with his titanium knife. But Vextha was a skilled warrior. Even while stumbling, the alien managed to bring his energy blade around in a defensive arc. Jake had to jump back to avoid being cut in half. "Impossible," Vextha said, breathing hard. "You fight like you are in a jungle, not in an honorable duel." "My grandfather fought in jungles," Jake said. "He taught me that any advantage is a good advantage if it keeps you alive." The alien warriors around the circle were making excited sounds. They had never seen combat like this before. Their formal fighting style had rules about what was allowed and what was not allowed. Jake was ignoring all of those rules. Vextha tried to regain control of the fight by making a series of powerful attacks. The energy blade swept through the air in complex patterns that would have been beautiful if they were not so deadly. But Jake had learned to read these patterns now. Each time Vextha began one of his formal attack sequences, Jake did something that broke the pattern. He would duck when he should have blocked, or attack when he should have defended, or use the walls and ceiling in ways that Vextha did not expect. Dr. Parker was watching the fight with great interest. She was taking notes on her tablet about how the two different fighting styles worked against each other. This information would be valuable for understanding Kalari culture. Lisa and Ryan were both tense with worry. They could see that Jake was fighting well, but they also knew that one mistake could end everything. The energy blade was still much more dangerous than Jake's simple knife. The fight continued for several more minutes. Both warriors were getting very tired now. Jake's uniform was completely soaked with sweat, and even Vexitha's silver skin was showing signs of strain. Then, Jake saw his chance. Vexitha made a spinning attack that was one of his most impressive moves. The alien turned completely around, bringing the energy blade in a full circle that should have been impossible to avoid. But Jake had seen this attack before. Instead of trying to dodge it, he timed his movement perfectly and stepped inside the circle of the blade's path. For just a moment, Jake was standing right next to Vexitha, too close for the alien to use his long energy weapon effectively. And in that moment, Jake placed the edge of his titanium knife against Vexitha's throat. The cargo bay became completely silent. Even the humming from the alien warriors stopped. Vexitha stood very still. The energy blade was still glowing in his hand, but he could not use it without exposing himself to Jake's knife. Both fighters were breathing hard, but neither moved. "You have won," Vexitha said quietly. "I yield to your skill." Jake kept his knife steady but spoke with respect. "You are a great warrior, Ambassador. This fight could have gone either way." "No," Vexitha said. "You fought better. You used your mind as well as your weapon. I was too proud and relied too much on my technology." Jake slowly lowered his knife and stepped back. Vexitha deactivated his energy blade and set it on the floor. The formal combat was over. The alien warriors began humming again, but this time, the sound was different. It was deeper and more respectful. Dr. Parker was typing notes quickly, trying to record everything about this important cultural moment. "Ambassador," Jake said, "before this fight started, you said I was using something wrong. I think maybe we were both using things wrong." Vexitha looked puzzled. "What do you mean?" "You were using your energy blade like it was just a weapon," Jake explained. "But it is also a tool for learning. Every time it hit my knife or the wall, it taught me something about how it works." Jake picked up his grandfather's knife and looked at it thoughtfully. "And I was using this knife like it was just an old piece of metal. But it is also a connection to my grandfather's wisdom and experience." Vexitha considered this. "So you are saying that both of our weapons are more than they appear to be?" "Yes," Jake said. "And maybe our people are more than they appear to be too." Dr. Parker looked up from her tablet with excitement. "Captain, I think I understand something important about what happened here. The ambassador challenged you because he thought humans were being deceptive about their military capabilities. But the fight proved that humans and Kalari have different ways of thinking about weapons and combat." Vexitha nodded slowly. "This is true. We thought you were hiding weapons to threaten us, but I see now that you carry weapons because you expect to face unexpected dangers. Your whole approach to combat is about adapting to surprises. And your approach is about perfecting techniques and following traditions," Jake said. "Both approaches have value. Maybe we can learn from each other." Lisa stepped forward, seeing an opportunity to rebuild the diplomatic bridge. "Ambassador, what if we created an exchange program? Human tactical instructors could teach your warriors about adaptive combat techniques. Your weapon masters could teach our people about energy blade technology." Vexitha seemed intrigued by this idea. "Such an exchange would benefit both our peoples. Your fighting methods are crude but effective. Our technology is advanced, but perhaps too rigid." The alien ambassador walked over to Jake and held out his energy blade. "Captain Morrison, would you be willing to learn how to use this weapon properly?" Jake accepted the energy blade carefully. It was heavier than it looked, and he could feel power humming through the handle. "I would be honored to learn, but only if you would be willing to train with this." Jake offered his grandfather's titanium knife to Vextha. The alien took it and examined it carefully. "It is very simple," Vextha said, "but I can feel that it has been used by a skilled warrior. There is balance and purpose in its design." "My grandfather carried it through 3 wars," Jake said. "He always said that a warrior's skill mattered more than his weapon's power." Vextha smiled, an expression that looked more natural now than it had when the aliens first came aboard. "Your grandfather sounds like someone I would have enjoyed meeting." Dr. Parker was still taking notes, but now she was smiling too. "This cultural exchange could revolutionize how both our species approach conflict resolution. You have both proven that different does not mean inferior." Ryan finally relaxed and moved away from his weapon. "Captain, does this mean we are not going to war?" "I think it means we are going to learn," Jake said. "And learning is usually better than fighting." Ambassador Vextha addressed the other alien warriors in their own language. Jake's computer translated his words. "This human has shown us that there are many ways to be strong. We will return to our ships and report that humans are worthy of respect and alliance." The aliens began to leave the cargo bay, but Vextha stayed behind for a moment longer. "Captain Morrison," the ambassador said, "you never answered my original question. I asked if you had any last words before our combat. You said I was using my weapon wrong, but what did you really mean?" Jake thought about this carefully. "I meant that you were using your weapon to threaten and intimidate instead of using it to understand and communicate. The best weapons are the ones that prevent fights, not the ones that win them." Vextha handed Jake's grandfather's knife back to him. "That is wisdom that both our peoples should remember." As the aliens left the cargo bay, Jake looked around at his crew. They all looked tired but relieved. The crisis was over, and it had ended with new understanding instead of violence. "Dr. Parker," Jake said, "please prepare a full report on what we learned about Kalari culture and combat techniques, and include everything we can about how human and alien approaches to conflict might complement each other." "Already working on it, Captain," she replied. Jake walked back to the window where he had been standing when the aliens first arrived. Space looked the same as it had before, full of stars and darkness. But everything had changed. Humans were no longer alone in the universe. And they had learned that being different from other species did not mean being enemies. Sometimes it just meant having new things to teach each other. Jake looked down at his grandfather's knife, then at the energy. Blade Vextha had let him keep temporarily. Both weapons had taught him important lessons today. But the most important lesson was that the best way to use any weapon was to find ways not to need it. The Ranger turned toward home, carrying news that would change human civilization forever. And in the ship's armory, an ancient titanium knife rested beside an alien energy blade, symbols of how different peoples could find strength in their differences instead of fear. 3 weeks had passed since the combat with Ambassador Vextha. The Ranger was halfway back to Earth, but Jake Morrison was not thinking about home. He was thinking about the message that had just arrived from the Kalari fleet. "Captain, you need to see this," Lisa Grant said as she entered Jake's private office. Her face showed worry and excitement at the same time. Jake looked up from the energy blade he had been studying. Vextha had given him the weapon to learn how to use it properly, but the alien technology was much more complex than it appeared. Every day, Jake discovered new features and capabilities that he had not known existed. "What is it, Lisa?" Jake asked, setting the energy blade carefully on his desk. "The Kalari have sent us a priority message, but it is not from Ambassador Vextha. It is from someone called High Commander Zektar, and the translation computer says this person outranks the ambassador by a lot." Jake felt his stomach tighten. During the 3 weeks since the combat, he and Vextha had exchanged many messages about cultural differences and fighting techniques. The ambassador had seemed genuinely interested in learning from humans and sharing Kalari knowledge, but Jake had also learned that not all Kalari agreed with Vextha's new opinions about humans. Some of the alien leaders believed that any species that could defeat their advanced technology was a threat that needed to be eliminated. "Show me the message," Jake said. Lisa activated the wall screen in Jake's office. The image that appeared showed a Kailari who looked very different from Ambassador Vextha. This alien was larger and had darker silver skin. Instead of the flowing robes that Vextha wore, this Kailari was dressed in what looked like military armor. "I am High Commander Zektar of the Kailari Defense Fleet," the alien said in a voice that was much harsher than Vextha's musical tone. "I am sending this message to the human ship called Ranger." Jake noticed that the alien did not use his name or title. This was probably an insult in Kailari culture. "Ambassador Vextha has reported the results of his combat with your captain," Zektar continued. "While the ambassador believes this proves that humans are worthy of respect, I have reached a different conclusion." Lisa and Jake looked at each other with growing concern. "Any species that can defeat our most advanced weapons represents a clear threat to Kailari security," the High Commander said. "Your primitive tools should not have been able to damage our energy blade technology. This suggests that humans possess knowledge or abilities that you have been hiding from us." Jake rubbed his forehead. This was exactly what he had been afraid would happen. The combat that had been meant to prove human honor was now being seen as evidence of human deception. "Therefore," Zektar continued, "I am ordering a full investigation of human military capabilities. A battle fleet of 12 ships will intercept your vessel in 6 days. You will submit to boarding and inspection, and your crew will be questioned about human weapons and technology." The message ended with the Kailari military symbol, which looked like a curved blade surrounded by stars. "Captain," Lisa said quietly, "Dr. Parker has been researching Kailari military structure. A high commander controls thousands of ships and millions of warriors. If Zektar decides that humans are a threat, he could order an attack on Earth." Jake stood up and walked to the window of his office. The stars looked the same as always, but now they seemed more dangerous. Somewhere out there, alien warships were coming to intercept the Ranger. "How long until we reach Earth?" Jake asked. "At our current speed, another 5 weeks," Lisa replied. "But if we push the engines harder, we might be able to get there in 4 weeks. And the Kailari fleet will reach us in 6 days, Jake said. "Even if we run as fast as we can, they will catch us long before we get to Earth." Jake thought about his options. He could try to fight the Kailari fleet, but the Ranger was an exploration ship, not a warship. It had some weapons for protection against space pirates and asteroids, but nothing that could stand against 12 alien battleships. He could try to hide, but space was very big and very empty. The Kailari had better sensors than humans did. They would find the Ranger no matter where it tried to go, or he could try to convince High Commander Zektar that humans were not a threat. But the alien had already made up his mind based on reports from Ambassador Vextha. "Lisa, send a message to Ambassador Vextha. Tell him what has happened and ask for his help." "Already done, Captain, but he has not replied yet. Dr. Parker thinks Zektar might have ordered him not to communicate with us." Jake picked up the energy blade from his desk and activated it. The blue glow filled his office with strange shadows. In the past 3 weeks, he had learned a lot about how the weapon worked, but he was still far from mastering it. The energy blade was not just a weapon. It was also a computer, a communicator, and a status symbol. Each blade was connected to the Kailari military network and could receive orders and send reports automatically. This gave Jake an idea. "Lisa, call Dr. Parker and Ryan to my office and ask Tony to monitor all Kailari communications channels. I want to know if we receive any more messages." When his senior officers arrived, Jake explained his plan. It was dangerous and probably would not work, but it was better than doing nothing. "The energy blade that Vextha gave me is still connected to their military network," Jake said. "Dr. Parker, do you think we could use it to send a message directly to High Commander Zektar?" Dr. Parker looked thoughtful. "Maybe. But the Kailari will know immediately that you are using their technology. They might see that as another act of deception." Or they might see it as evidence that I am trying to communicate honestly, Jake said. Either way, it is worth the risk. Ryan looked skeptical. Captain, what if this message just makes Zektar more angry? We could be making our situation worse. Our situation is already very bad, Jake replied. If Zektar believes we are a threat, he will attack Earth whether we send a message or not. At least this way we have a chance to explain ourselves. Jake spent the next hour learning how to use the Energy Blade's communication system. The alien technology was designed for Kalari hands and minds, so it was difficult for a human to operate. But eventually, Jake figured out how to activate the message. Function. Dr. Parker, I need your help with the translation, Jake said. I want this message to be perfect. Any mistake could be seen as an insult or a threat. Dr. Parker had become very good at understanding Kalari language and culture during their journey. She helped Jake compose a message that would be respectful, but also clear about human intentions. Hi, Commander Zekitar, Jake began his message. I am Captain Jake Morrison of the human exploration vessel Ranger. I am sending this message using the energy blade that Ambassador Vexatha gave me as a gift of friendship between our peoples. Jake paused to make sure the translation was correct before continuing. I understand that you are concerned about human military capabilities. I want to assure you that humans have no intention of threatening the Kalari people. The combat between myself and Ambassador Vexatha was meant to resolve a misunderstanding, not to demonstrate human power. Jake looked at Dr. Parker, who nodded to show that the translation was good so far. I invite you to board my ship and inspect our technology for yourself. You will see that human weapons are simple and limited compared to Kalari technology. What happened during the combat was not because humans have secret weapons, but because we have different ways of thinking about combat. Jake took a deep breath before recording the most important part of his message. If you still believe that humans are a threat after inspecting our ship, then I challenge you to single combat, as is your custom. But I ask that this combat be to determine the truth, not to settle a question of honor. Dr. Parker looked worried. Captain, are you sure about this? Zektar is a military commander. He will probably be an even better fighter than Ambassador Vexatha was. Maybe, Jake said. But it is better than letting him attack Earth without understanding what humans are really like. Jake finished recording his message and sent it through the Energy Blade's communication system. Now all they could do was wait and see how the High Commander would respond. Within an hour, they had their answer. High Commander Zektar's reply came faster than Jake had expected. The alien's face appeared on the main screen of the Ranger's bridge, and his expression was not friendly. Human Captain, Zektar said, his voice cold and sharp. Your message has been received. I find it interesting that you know how to use our communication technology. This proves my point that humans are more dangerous than Ambassador Vexatha believes. Jake stood in front of the main screen with his senior officers. Beside him, the energy blade was clipped to his belt, and he could feel its weight like a reminder of the responsibility he carried. However, Zektar continued, I will accept your invitation to inspect your ship, but understand this, I am not coming alone. I will bring a full boarding party of 50 warriors, and they will examine every part of your vessel. Lisa stepped closer to Jake and whispered, Captain, 50 Kalari warriors could take over our ship easily. Our crew is only 30 people. Jake nodded but kept watching the screen. Zektar was not finished with his message. As for your challenge to combat, the High Commander said, I accept, but not under the same conditions as your fight with Ambassador Vexatha. You defeated him because you used tricks and unconventional tactics. I will not make the same mistake. Jake felt his mouth go dry. This was not going the way he had hoped. If you wish to fight me, Zektar continued, it will be with Kalari weapons, following Kalari rules, in a proper combat arena. No tricks, no surprises, no using the environment to your advantage. Pure skill against pure skill. The alien's black eyes seemed to stare directly at Jake through the screen. I will arrive at your location in 4 days. Prepare yourself, human. Unlike Ambassador Vextha, I have never lost a combat challenge. Ever. The message ended, leaving the bridge in silence. Ryan was the first to speak. Captain, this is a trap. Zektar is setting up conditions where you cannot possibly win. Maybe, Jake said. But if I refuse his challenge, he will attack Earth. At least this way, only I am at risk instead of the whole human race. Dr. Parker was reading information about High Commander Zektar on her tablet. What she found was not encouraging. Captain, according to the files Ambassador Vextha shared with us, Zektar has fought in over 200 combat challenges. He has never been defeated. He is considered the greatest warrior in the Kalari military. Jake rubbed his forehead. His victory over Vextha had been difficult enough, and that had been with all the advantages of fighting in an unexpected way. Now he would have to face an even more skilled opponent under conditions that favored the alien. There has to be something we can do, Lisa said. Some way to improve your chances. Jake thought about his grandfather's lessons. Steve Morrison had always said that when you could not change the rules of a fight, you had to find ways to use those rules to your advantage. Dr. Parker, what do we know about Kalari combat arenas? How do they work? Dr. Parker typed quickly on her tablet. From what I can find, they use energy fields to create a controlled fighting space. The arena can change shape and size, and it prevents fighters from leaving until the combat is over. What about weapons? Jake asked. Both fighters get identical. Weapons. Usually energy blades, but sometimes other types. The arena computer selects the weapons randomly to make sure the fight is fair. Jake felt a small spark of hope. If the weapons were selected randomly, there was a chance he might get something other than an energy blade. And if both fighters had identical weapons, Jake's experience with simple tools might give him an advantage. Tony, send a message to Earth, Jake said to his communications officer. Tell them what is happening and give them all the information we have about Kalari technology and culture. If something happens to us, they need to be prepared. Tony nodded and began working on the message. It would take several weeks for the signal to reach Earth, but it was important that someone knew what was happening. Jake spent the next 4 days preparing for the combat in every way he could think of. He practiced with the energy blade that Vextha had given him, trying to master the alien weapon. He also practiced with his grandfather's knife, keeping his skills with familiar tools sharp. Dr. Parker helped him study everything they knew about Kalari fighting techniques. She had recorded videos of his combat with Vextha, and they watched them over and over, looking for clues about how Kalari warriors thought and moved. Ryan organized combat training sessions for the crew in case the boarding party tried to take over the ship. The Ranger was not a military vessel, but its crew knew how to defend themselves if necessary. Lisa worked on diplomatic strategies, trying to think of ways to convince Zektar that humans were not a threat. She prepared speeches and presentations that might help Jake avoid the combat altogether. But Jake knew that the High Commander had already made up his mind. Zektar saw humans as a threat that needed to be eliminated, and only total victory in combat would change his opinion. On the 4th day, the Kalari fleet arrived. Jake watched from the bridge as 12 massive warships dropped out of hyperspace, near the Ranger. Each ship was 10 times larger than the human vessel, and their weapons could have destroyed the Ranger in seconds. Captain, Tony reported, we are receiving a transmission from the flagship. Put it on screen, Jake said. Hi. Commander Zektar appeared on the main display. He was wearing full combat armor that made him look even more intimidating than before. The armor was black with silver trim, and it seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Human Captain, prepare to be boarded. Lower your shields and disable your weapons. Any attempt to resist will result in the immediate destruction of your ship. Jake looked at his crew. They all looked scared but determined. These people had volunteered to explore space and make contact with alien life. None of them had expected to become the focus of an interstellar conflict. Lower shields and power down weapons, Jake ordered. All crew members report to stations and wait for further orders. The boarding process took 2 hours. 50 Kalari warriors came aboard the Ranger and began a systematic inspection of every room and system. They were professional and efficient, but Jake could see that they were also looking for any excuse to declare humans a threat. The alien warriors were different from Ambassador Vextha and his diplomatic team. These were soldiers, and they moved like people who expected trouble. Each one carried multiple weapons and wore armor that looked like it could stop anything the Ranger's crew might use against them. High Commander Zektar came aboard last, accompanied by 6 elite guards. He was even larger in person than he had appeared on screen, and his presence seemed to fill whatever room he entered. "Captain Morrison," Zektar said when they met in the cargo bay, "I have come to see for myself what kind of threat your species represents." Jake stood as straight as possible and tried to project confidence he did not feel. "High Commander, I hope that when you finish your inspection, you will see that humans want peace, not war." Zektar looked around the cargo bay where Jake had fought Ambassador Vextha just a few weeks before. The alien's black eyes took in every detail of the room. "This is where you defeated one of our most skilled diplomats," Zektar said. "Show me exactly how you did it." For the next hour, Jake demonstrated the techniques he had used against Vextha. He showed how he had used the environment to his advantage, how he had adapted to the alien's fighting style, and how he had caused the energy blade to overload. Zektar watched everything carefully, asking questions and taking notes on a device that looked like a tablet made of liquid metal. "Interesting," the High Commander said when Jake finished his demonstration. "You fight like an animal instead of a warrior. No technique, no honor, no respect for proper combat forms." Jake felt anger rising in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. "High Commander, humans fight to win and survive. We adapt to whatever situation we face." "Exactly," Zektar said. "This makes you unpredictable and dangerous. A proper warrior follows established patterns and traditions. Your chaotic methods could disrupt our entire military doctrine." Jake realized that he had made a mistake. By showing Zektar exactly how he had defeated Vextha, he had confirmed the High Commander's fears about human fighting capabilities. "High Commander," Dr. Parker said, stepping forward. "May I respectfully point out that humans only use these tactics when we are defending ourselves. We have never attacked anyone without provocation." Zektar turned his attention to Dr. Parker. "And who are you, human?" "I am Dr. Amy Parker, xenobiologist and cultural specialist. I have been studying Kalari society and trying to understand your people." "What have you learned?" Zektar asked. Dr. Parker took a deep breath. "I have learned that Kalari and humans have different approaches to conflict, but both approaches have the same goal: protecting what we care about. Maybe our differences could be strengths instead of threats." Zektar considered this for a moment. Then he laughed, a sound like metal scraping against metal. "Pretty words, Dr. Parker. But words will not change the fact that your captain defeated our technology with primitive tools. This proves that humans are either much more advanced than you claim or much more cunning." The High Commander walked over to Jake and stopped just inches away from his face. Jake Morrison barely slept that night. He lay in his bunk staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. In a few hours, he would face High Commander Zektar in combat that would decide the fate of humanity's relationship with the stars. The energy blade that Ambassador Vextha had given him rested on the small table beside his bed. Jake had practiced with it for weeks, but he still felt clumsy compared to how naturally the Kalari used their weapons. His grandfather's titanium knife was also there, cleaned and sharp, though he doubted he would be allowed to use it in the arena. A soft knock on his door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," Jake said. Dr. Parker entered carrying her tablet and a cup of coffee. She looked like she had not slept either. "Captain, I have been studying everything I can find about Kalari combat arenas. I think I found something that might help you." Jake sat up in his bunk. What did you find? Dr. Parker activated her tablet and showed Jake a complex diagram. The arena systems are very advanced, but they follow specific rules. The computer that controls the arena always tries to make fights as fair as possible. How does that help me? Jake asked. Zektar said we would use identical weapons and follow Kalari rules. That is exactly the point, Dr. Parker said with excitement. The arena computer does not just give fighters identical weapons. It analyzes both fighters and chooses weapons that will make the combat most fair based on their different skills and experience. Jake looked at the diagram more carefully. You mean it might not choose energy blades? Right. Zektar has decades of experience with energy weapons. You have only had a few weeks. The arena computer might decide that energy blades would make the fight too unfair. Jake felt a small spark of hope. What other weapons might it choose? Dr. Parker scrolled through her notes. The Kalari have many traditional weapons from their ancient history. Some are similar to human weapons. There are impact weapons like clubs and hammers, projectile weapons like spears and arrows, and various types of blades. Have you told anyone else about this? Jake asked. Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first. But Captain, there is something else you should know. I also found information about what happens if you lose. Jake's hope faded. Tell me. If Zektar defeats you, he will not just recommend attacking Earth. According to Kalari military law, he will have the authority to order an immediate strike against what he considers a threat to their civilization. Jake felt cold inside his chest. How immediate? The attack fleet could reach Earth in less than 2 months. And Captain, they have weapons that could destroy entire cities from space. Jake stood up and walked to the small window in his quarters. Outside, he could see the lights of the Kalari fleet surrounding the Ranger. 12 massive warships, each one carrying enough firepower to devastate a planet. Dr. Parker, if something happens to me today, I want you to take command of the ship. Get the crew home safely and make sure Earth knows everything we have learned about the Kalari. Captain, you are going to win, Dr. Parker said firmly. You defeated Ambassador Vextha when everyone thought it was impossible. You can defeat Zektar, too. Jake wished he felt as confident as Dr. Parker sounded. Vextha had been a skilled fighter, but he had also been overconfident and set in his ways. Zektar was different. The High Commander was a career military officer who had never lost a fight. Another knock came at Jake's door. This time it was Lisa, Ryan, and Tony together. Captain, Lisa said, we wanted to talk to you before the combat begins. Jake invited them in, though his small quarters were now very crowded with 5 people. Sir, Ryan said, the crew has been talking. We know you are fighting for all of us, for all of humanity. We want you to know that we believe in you. Tony nodded. Captain, my family back on Earth will never know what you did for them. But I will make sure they know no matter what happens. Lisa stepped forward and handed Jake a small object. It was a patch from the Ranger's mission insignia, showing Earth surrounded by stars. This is for good luck, she said, to remind you what you are fighting for. Jake took the patch and attached it to his uniform. Thank you, all of you. It has been an honor to serve with this crew. 2 hours later, Jake stood in the cargo bay, waiting for the Kalari to take him to their combat arena. He wore his dress uniform and carried both the energy blade and his grandfather's knife. High Commander Zektar had said they would use identical weapons chosen by the arena, but Jake wanted his familiar tools with him anyway. When the Kalari transport arrived, Jake was surprised to see Ambassador Vextha among the escort party. Ambassador, Jake said, I did not expect to see you here. Vextha looked uncomfortable. Captain Morrison, I tried to convince High Commander Zektar that this combat is unnecessary, but he would not listen to my counsel. I understand, Jake said. You have done everything you could to help. Vextha moved closer and spoke quietly, so the other Kalari could not hear. Captain, Zektar is not just a skilled warrior. He is also proud and angry. He sees your victory over me as an insult to all Kailari. He will not show you the same respect that I learned to have for human fighting methods." "What are you trying to tell me?" Jake asked. "Be very careful, my friend. Zektar follows the rules, but he interprets them in ways that favor himself. Watch for tricks that are technically legal but not honorable." The transport ship was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. The interior was made of the same liquid metal material as Kailari weapons, and it seemed to change shape as they moved through it. The walls showed views of space around them, as if the ship was transparent. The journey to the arena ship took only a few minutes. When they arrived, Jake saw that hundreds of Kailari had gathered to watch the combat. The arena itself was a large spherical room with energy barriers that glowed softly blue. High Commander Zektar was already waiting in the center of the arena. He had removed his armor and wore simple combat clothing that looked like it was made of flexible metal. His silver skin seemed darker than before, and his black eyes showed no emotion. "Captain Morrison," Zektar said as Jake entered the arena, "are you prepared to face the consequences of your species' deception?" "I am prepared to prove that humans want peace, not war," Jake replied. The arena computer began to speak in the Kailari language. Ambassador Vextha translated for Jake. "The computer is analyzing both fighters to determine the most fair weapons for this combat," Vextha said. "It will take a few minutes to complete the analysis." Jake looked around the arena. The energy barriers would prevent either fighter from leaving until the combat was over. The floor was made of the same adaptive material as the transport ship, and Jake could feel it adjusting to his weight and movements. Hundreds of Kailari warriors watched from galleries around the arena. Their faces showed curiosity and anticipation. Most of them probably expected this to be a quick and easy victory for their high commander. The arena computer finished its analysis and announced its decision. Ambassador Vextha's face showed surprise as he translated. "The computer has chosen an unusual combination," Vextha said. "Both fighters will receive a traditional Kailari war staff and a set of impact gauntlets." Jake had never heard of these weapons before. "What do those do?" "A war staff is like a long club with weighted ends," Vextha explained quickly. "Impact gauntlets strengthen your hands and arms for close combat. These are very old weapons that most modern Kailari have never used." High Commander Zektar looked angry. "This is ridiculous. We should be using energy blades, not ancient relics." But the arena computer had made its decision. Two sets of weapons materialized on pedestals in the center of the arena. The war staffs were about 6 feet long and made of dark metal. The gauntlets looked like gloves covered in small metal plates. Jake walked to the weapons and picked up his set. The war staff was heavier than it looked, but it was well balanced. The gauntlets fit over his hands and seemed to enhance his grip strength. Zektar took his weapons with obvious displeasure. "Captain Morrison, these primitive tools will not save you. I have studied all forms of combat, ancient and modern." Jake tested the weight and balance of the war staff. It reminded him of the practice weapons his grandfather had used to teach him about staff fighting. Steve Morrison had learned techniques from many different Earth cultures, including some that use similar weapons. "High Commander," Jake said, "maybe primitive tools are exactly what this fight needs." The arena computer announced that the combat would begin in 60 seconds. Jake tried to remember everything his grandfather had taught him about fighting with long weapons. "Distance is your friend with a staff," Steve had said during one lesson. "Keep your enemy at the end of your weapon, and use both ends to attack and defend." Jake looked across the arena at Zektar. The High Commander was practicing moves with his war staff, and Jake could see that the alien was skilled with this weapon too. But there was something different about how Zektar held the staff compared to how Jake held his. The Kailari held his weapon like a spear, using mainly thrusting attacks. Jake held his staff like his grandfather had taught him, ready to use spinning and sweeping motions. The arena computer announced that combat would begin in 10 seconds. Jake took a deep breath and thought about everything that depended on this fight.